Quick word of thanks, not only to all of you, but to Bill Fry for the idea to have Becca come. And so, Bill, can you just raise your hand if there's anyone that doesn't know who you are? And such a wonderful thing to have your son, your daughter here this morning with us, and other special guests. Christina and Gwen, who are here along with Becca from Thistle Farms, are continuing to set up the wonderful display of artisanal goods that are made by Thistle Farms, from soap to essential oils to bracelets to the books that have sprung from Becca's heart. So we hope after worship you would make sure to just peruse those amazing things. And
before.
What's that?
Or before.
Or before, yes. Well, you're going to want to get into worship when we're done because we don't have much time. So shop after and do stay for worship. She doesn't know what time we're going to be done, so that's okay. But then again, a lot of latecomers come on the hymn, so that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You can miss the first part of the service.
You've spoken like a true preacher. Just be here in time for her words during the sermon. Yeah. And there are essential oils that have a caffeine-like effect, so if you're sleepy, make sure to really smell those before the preaching so that you're fully awake. They always do that with me, so just leave those here. We wanted to ground this conversation in the lived word, and so much of what we heard of yesterday from Becca was about how theology is lived, not just thought of and conceived, but lived. And so that'll be very much a weaving of our conversation today. And I've had a chance to read several of your books. I bought them through Amazon. I didn't get them from the table, but you can buy them off the table after worship or before or during. And wanted to start with a question that is grounded in the reality that God is always speaking to each of us. God is speaking to each of us ever and always. And you and I talked about this in the car a little bit, about how this sacred voice can come to us, this whispering, still, small voice, and we can both sense it deep within ourself, within the well of our soul, as silent as it might be, and yet also sense it echoing from far beyond the seen horizon. And this space between the voice within and the voice that calls from beyond, knowing it's one voice, it's God's voice in both locations, the space between and the tension between that is really where dreams can be born and conceived, and where a sense of call can grow. And if we listen to those voices and try and bring them into closer concert, that's how we live into that call. But if we don't, sometimes that's also the space in which dreams and a sense of call, a sacred sense of call, can die. And I just wanted to ask you, you talk in your book, Snake Oil, about a moment a few years after you had been ordained, and where this dream had been born about building a community. And yet it was very much in flux. And you talk also of a moment, an unexpected moment, where grace and courage found you and allowed that dream that was withering perhaps on the vine, withering in that space, to come back to life. And I wanted you to just talk a little bit about what was that dream that you were carrying at that time, and what was that moment that led you to say, yes.
Thank you for reading my books. That's so nice. I mean, mostly the people haven't got any context, so I appreciate that. And I too want to start off by saying thank you, Bill Fry. Thank you for just everything, your whole life and work, and for including me in. And to have, the star of Chicago theater right with us, Kate Fry, and the veterinarian from Tennessee, Michael. I love that we're both from Tennessee and we came to Winnetka to see each other. We haven't seen each other since a family wedding like 25 years ago. That's crazy. Anyway, what a gift that is. So, I also think that this voice and these dreams are all born sometimes in great circumstances, but for a lot of us, it's kind of when we're broken open that, we're kind of open to compassion and hearing things and seeing things and feeling people's pain in a different way when we've gone through it. It's why so many times, like if you're widowed, you're a good you understand exactly in a different way what somebody's going through that's just lost someone they love. And you're present in a different way, and you can kind of speak to that. And I think for me, my broken openness in my childhood, including some years of sexual abuse that began in my church when I was 6, really had a lot to do with these dreams and these voices born in me when I started the ordination process and got ordained, that I always really wanted community to be safe. I wanted that deeply. And that felt like a calling to me, and it felt like a voice thing to me. But also, it was a really practical thing to think sometimes our communities aren't safe, and we keep secrets around sexual abuse or the shame of our sexual lives and our past. And so to have a space where people can be, especially women who have survived all kinds of trauma and trafficking and addiction and abuse and imprisonment and all that, felt important. And I had a husband, I do have a husband, I still have a husband, we just celebrated 31 years, who is a country music writer, but he started off as a country music artist, and he was on the road with Columbia Records at the time. And I had one son named Levi Hummon, and I was pregnant with our second son. So while I had these ideas if we could make these beautiful sanctuaries for women that would be free and long-term with no authority living in the house, so people could really experience community together and what healing would be like, I didn't do it. And so I would just go down to these feeding programs. So it was like kind of like a spiritual compromise if you ever do that. You know, it's like I'm probably not going to be a nun and move, you know, to faraway lands and start things, but you know, I can do this. So I had my son with me. We finished the feeding program. This is 1995, early in 1995, and I will say too that I was also, those kinds of programs always kind of traumatized me.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that women who are on the streets are raped, and I know that even when you're giving out sandwiches and stuff, what people are going back into is pretty dangerous and rough. And that kind of makes me anxious. So finished the program, got my son, trying to get my son in the car, and you know how it's hard enough anyway when you're pregnant to try to get a kid in a car seat. And then my son was doing that thing that like 4-year-olds do, which is that, you know, Olympic strength back bend, and you're trying to push him down and they're leaning back. And he's leaning back because we're parked out in front of this old strip club called the Classic Cat. And there's this huge billboard out front of a lady with a cat ears and tail. And she has like a memory of a cat suit on. Not really, you know, just nothing. And she's just leaning back and smiling. And my son says, "Mama, why is that lady smiling?" And it just made me so sad when he asked me that. And I was like, I think part of it was he is so innocent and young. And that is just about the age where all my trouble started. And it gave me so much compassion really for myself and what I had gone through. And I thought, he's not going to ask that someday. It's just going to seem completely normal to him that we dress women up in less than cat suits and sell them for less than cats and want them to smile the whole time. It's just going to fade into the landscape. That's all it's going to do. That's what we do. And that day, I really thought, I'm starting this, and I want to raise my boys, and I have 3 of them, to really love women and respect women and think, you know, that's not what we do. We have a lot more love and grace than that for each other, and a lot more respect. And that was the day I started Thistle Farms. That was a long answer, sorry.
That's what they want. They want to hear your stories. Becca had said to me in one of our phone calls, she said, "Can we just sit up there and like have a conversation like we've had on the phone, and you just pitch me things and then I can tell stories?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds like a good plan." So that's what we're doing.
Good.
Your use of language, something, and I know Jeffrey and I have talked about this in conversations in preparing for today, is something I so appreciate. I think we can all appreciate, because you use often what seem to be formal words or liturgical or theological words in such an animated and salt-of-the-earth way. And just the way you just described sanctuary, what it really is, what it really can be, what it can offer each of us, and what we can offer to it. Not just our best and our strength for those that are feeling the need for healing, but our brokenness as a common offering of compassion and care. And you're talking about creating a landscape, a new landscape, a crossing over Jordan to a different landscape, a redeemed landscape in terms of Thistle Farms. It's very powerful, just so appreciate your use of language. Symbols are obviously a huge part of who we are as people of faith, as people in the world. We live in a sea of brand images and brand icons, and images can convey, like a picture, 1,000 or more words, and impart things that words can even not quite capture. They allow for mystery and yet meaning both to coexist. And of all the images that you could have chosen to represent and to speak for and to invite people into understanding this redeemed landscape, this redeemed community, this sanctuary you were going to build, you chose the thistle. Why did you choose that? What is it that says, and how has the meaning of the thistle even deepened over the years since you founded Thistle Farms?
I have a question. I think, I don't know about y'all, but whatever your work is and whatever your profession is, I don't think we even know we use inside language.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wrote a book a couple years ago for HarperCollins, and they said it's just filled with Episcopal words,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody wants to hear those words. That's boring. And I was like, which words are they? I don't even know which words they are. You can't use the word sacristy. And it was like, what do you call that room? I don't know another word. And they were like, just a closet. And I was like, oh.
The little changing room.
Yeah, I cannot call it that. But it's like words feel like they're so important and sacred sometimes. And it also puts people off. And I think theology is laden with them. And all the words trip people up.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to be careful about that. And I feel bad sometimes that I don't even know when I'm using those words that are off-putting to people, and we lose that common language.
Mm-hmm.
And I know y'all have that here, within your congregation. When we walked through there, you said that's our covenant stone, and I was like, well, I have never heard that term before, a covenant stone.
And I said, wow, this is a moment when a congregational minister is teaching an Episcopalian something? And it was a wonderful moment.
We do not
It was like high church, low church. Come on.
What is it? I think it's awesome that you have that. I'm not sure what it is. But,
A hermeneutic of doubt.
oh, okay, got it. No, but it reminded me of, anyway, it doesn't, I can go on a million different tangents, but the idea for me is, even in this justice work for women, there's so many words that, trip people up, push people out, and also, it's that theology word too. They always talk about this idea of, we're going to restore women.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of language makes me crazy.
Say more.
Well, we're the hero, we're the savior in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, the women at least I've met are mostly self-rescued, self-restored. Maybe we'll buy some products, or maybe we'll offer the time and the space for women and resources for women to do their healing work. But it puts people really in a degrading, in my mind, space, and then we become this oh my God, look what we've done. Oh my God. And the same thing, people are going to take Christ to the prisons. I hear that all the time. We just bring Christ to the prisons, and it's like, guess where Christ is? If you want to have
sacristy?
In the sacristy, in the closet in prison. So I just think it's sometimes I think we forget when we have these words that are so troublesome to people sometimes. I think it's part of the problem with church and institutional life is some of those, for me at least, it's some of those words. So I've tried to make it, for me, better. And so and I'll tell more about the use of why the thistle when I preach today. I'm going to talk about that. But I will say that is a really common thing. And so we've tried to make it really, really common in our, the work that we do and the candles that we make. It's all very, very plain. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea is that brings us together more than distancing ourselves around particular rituals and theology that doesn't necessarily bring us all into the circle together.
Mm-hmm. So you talked, again, beautifully in kind of deconstructing or reconstructing how we look at things, about how we're really good at creating binaries. It either is here or it is here. God is present here but not here. Mm-hmm. It's this or it's this. And there's a tyranny. There is a divisive quality in talking about things in those binary, sometimes false binary terms. And you said, guess where Jesus already is? In the prison. We're not bringing Jesus in. We need to go and find Jesus there more than we need to go and bring Jesus there. So where in the course of your ministry, either within the Thistle Farms community or in your broad international travels, have you found the Jesus that was already there? Where has that been revealed to you, and what maybe might be a story or two about how you saw something and were just struck by it?
Oh my God, you better answer that. That's my whole life. That makes me weepy. Because, it's like, again, translation of the language is, where do you find the kingdom? Where is life with God? It's like, where do you live in love? That's how I've translated it. Where do you find yourself living in love? And that's possible, right, anywhere for any of us, anytime. Just, the whole journey of faith is really about blind and light, seeing, and what you see you can't unsee, kind of thing. So for me, it's just hoping to see. I just hope, and pray. And I get, part of the reason I was saying I want you to come to Rwanda with me, it's like, so it's a group of, one of our first international partners. So we have partners all over the U.S., communities. There's about 300 long-term beds now. And we have partnerships in about 20 countries now, where if you go to the table, when you go to the table before service, I'm just messing with you. When you go to the table, you'll see products by women survivor artisans from all over the world that we have partners with. And one of my favorite partnerships that we go to every couple of years, and we've been going for years and years, is a group of women farmers in Rwanda. And the women farmers in Rwanda, who all were farmers before the genocide in 1994, were 1 million people were killed in 100 days. They went back into those same fields where they had been raped and brutalized, or dug up the bones of their family and planted these healing oils that are unbelievable that we use in products. If you see our bug spray, it's all geranium from the women in Rwanda. And it's a very amazing bug spray. It's awesome. We beat Jessica Alba's bug spray. It's the best. It's tested better than any other bug spray that's all natural bug spray. When Barbara Clear was here yesterday, another friend of the family's, she hawked all of our bug sprays. I don't even think we have anymore, because she was like, this is the most effective stuff. So anyway, it's that whole thing. It's lavish, it's beautiful, and it's justice oriented, and it's great. So we were back there in January of this year, and they've grown, and they've done, they have patchouli, they have geranium, they have lemongrass, they have lavender, they have eucalyptus, beautiful oils. And so you walk out in those fields, bless you, it's the land of 10,000 hills. And if you want to go stand somewhere, it's, one of those, like, I don't know, it's like cathedral from ancient times, where there's been battles and also beauty, and all of it's right there, and you're smelling all this stuff, and it's great. And then the women come harvest it all, and then they throw it all in this huge distillation system. And it's how you convert those plants into houses and education for children and rebuilding communities and like this hope and love. And it's called the Village of Hope. They name their place, and they build houses for every person that comes through and begins working on it. So it's powerful to watch. And so I was standing there, and one of the farmers in January was just, you put in probably 200 pounds of lavender into the top, and then it just, there's boiling water, and it all distills. And it's a cauldron, like a witch's cauldron. and then they feed the fire underneath it. And I was like, oh crap, I'm witnessing a burning bush. I'm in the presence of a burning bush, and it's like I did have that feeling of like I wanted to fall on my knees and start just, this praise that these women who had, how do they keep going, and how did they build their lives again from that, and then they just making these oils, that just go out into the world to do healing work. And it was like, this is the biggest burning, greatest bush I've ever seen. So that's my most recent experience of like being flattened by it, and thinking like, I wouldn't be anywhere else in the world except right here.
Yeah. And you couldn't be any more fully you anywhere else in the world than right there at that moment. And connected. And the woman and man, there was a couple that helped start it. They said, what were the chances that we would ever be walking the fields in Rwanda together and talking about love? And in what I said is, I think it was inevitable. If you're both pursuing justice and essential oils, it was inevitable that we were going to meet. So you were flattened in that moment and just absolutely discovered and found kind of and woven in all at the same time. I want to pick up on that image of that very, very practical and incendiary and elemental refinement that you were watching as these plants become something that then is an essential oil, or the oil that goes into, a bug spray. And pick up on something that you said to the group that had gathered yesterday, when we heard such powerful testimony from Christina and Gwen as well. And you had said, after we had prepared the tea and we had taken time to pause and to steep in the moment and to recall loved ones that we were lifting prayers for, with whom we would want to share those cups of tea, thus broadening the circle to beyond just the ones who were in the room. You talked about how you believe less now than you did when you were first ordained, and yet what you still believe, you believe with all your heart, all your soul, and you really live it. And I was just so struck by that. Try to. You believe less now than you did when you were first ordained, and yet what you believe now, and as you said it, you were one leg up on a chair, standing tall, holding your tea in your hand. Your face was kind of slightly elevated, and you had this very clear and beaming energy in your face, and you were both in the room and yet kind of looking beyond the near horizon as you said it. There was a kind of a call being expressed as you did it. And you believe less now than you did when you were first ordained, but what you believe with all your heart, all your soul, and you try to live it. What do you now believe with that level of conviction, and what has been refined away? What has been distilled out that no longer is of use or no longer feels true?
Do you have stuff like that?
Yes.
Do y'all have stuff like that?
Absolutely.
Yes. I don't want to be the only heretic in the room. What don't y'all
Nothing
believe?
but heretics.
Well, that begs the definition of heretic.
Okay. Yeah, it's probably true. I would say, I would just say that I have let go of a lot of institutional religious dogma that gets in the way of the doggedness of love. Does that make sense? That's how I would say it. That I feel safe with a bunch of strangers saying. But I also will say that my whole ministry, I have mumbled parts of the creed. My whole ministry. It's different parts at different times, but I've definitely never just like recited that with confidence. And I don't mean that it's a historical document. It is a communal declaration. I get all that. But I'm just saying, I love that we come together and we kind of mumble our way through it to get to love. And that's what I want to do. And so I used to panic about it, like, here's the 7 sacraments, here's the 4 types of love, here's the 18 things. And I think now it's like, why do we compartmentalize everything? Why is there not one big love, one big sacramental way to live, one way to, to do this work? And